Okay, today's job, we've got a lot of interesting trees to deal with. They are all the Chinese elms, Ulmus parvifolia. And they were all planted in the median strip in this complex, this little townhome complex. So we've got a number of different difficulties to deal with. Obviously, we've got lots of cars to deal with and a lot of homeowners that need to get in and out, so traffic is a bit of a nuisance here. We do have the bucket in here. One of the big problems is the way these trees have been pruned for so many years. You've probably heard the term lion's tailing, where you get into the inside of a tree and clean out just the middle and the trees just get wider and wider, and that's part of the problem. Consequently, many of these trees have been breaking branches. We're starting to see a lot more of this. This big limb right here is split and cracked. And if you look at it from both sides, you can see that this limb has pretty much got to go. The crack comes all the way down to here. All right, here's the split from up above. And it's been like that for quite a while. I can tell how dried out it is. So pulling this back together is not an option. So, let me give you an example of what has been done in the past. They've hired tree trimmers to come in here. The guys jumped up in the tree with a chainsaw and went zing, 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 and took out a few big cuts in the middle, cleaned out the suckers, and they were done. And the trees get wider and wider and wider. So all the growth is out on the very, very ends. This is a really good example. We've not gotten to these trees yet, but this tree right here, it's on the verge of breaking. You can see that limb over on the left side. It's about a 6-inch diameter limb, but it's hanging way out there, and all the foliage is on the very, very end. It's like a big lion's tail. It's a big poof of branches. So at this time of year, we've got a lot of brittleness going on because it's hot. Look at that one up there, that branch right there. There's no growth on it except for way out on the very, very end. So that whole thing is ready to explode. Now, you don't want to come in and hard prune these trees. You don't want to cut them back to stubs, but you have to get enough weight out of these trees to make them reasonably safe. Reasonably safe, that's a very, very interesting term. No tree can be ever considered absolutely safe unless it's a little tiny tree, but you can make them much, much safer. So once again, I can see all the cuts. There was a cut here, there was a cut here, a cut over there, and they just did what was really quick and easy. They made their money and they got out. So the long-term impact is now just a huge, massive growth way out on the very end. So we have to bring them back in. We have to reduce some of that leverage. But in a lot of cases, some of these branches have just gotten so long that even the leverage we take out of there may not be enough. So we're making some decisions. This is the tree that started this whole job. We had some failures happening. We had a big failure right here starting to go. You can see the crack developing. This limb right here went way out there and filled up that little void. And because it was cracked, we didn't have any options. Now if you look at this side, it's kind of hard to see in the dark there, but that crack extends from there all the way down. So that leaves the upper portion of this tree, this whole section up here, potentially weak from this breakdown here. So I might suggest a cable up here from this side over to here, but we took a lot of weight out there. I don't think we can get much more off without making the tree completely imbalanced. This limb on this side, the one that he's standing on, you know, see how it goes up and then bends down and goes straight out? That's a real good candidate for a break. It's going to break right where he's standing. This is kind of interesting. Here's where two branches were rubbing together and they've actually grown together and grafted. I'm not going to take that out of there because it is what it is. It's not particularly weak, But there was one branch up in here, right there, that was rubbing on this branch over here. We've already taken the weight off of it and it lifted up. But you do have to pay attention to situations where branches are abrading each other. So we're going to take this one out over here completely. These are some of the finished examples of the trees that we have done. We've reduced them in weight all the way around. Unfortunately, there's a few areas that we've had to make some harsh cuts. And there's also some trees that are declining. I'm finding a lot of trunk canker in here as well as armillaria. I found some mushrooms. This tree, it looks terrible. We got all the end weight, we got all the dead wood out, and that's all that's left of it. This one looks reasonably good. Unfortunately, there's a few areas that we didn't have any options but to leave some moderately hard cuts. You know, we leave some tufts of foliage wherever possible, but because this has been lion-tailed so many times, there's nothing else to cut back to. So it's either leave some areas that are going to sucker out or take the branches off entirely. Now it's a perfectly safe limb, but it just looks a little unsightly. And the same over here. We had to do an awful lot of large wounds. This tree over here, I'm not sure about this one. They talked about this. They said, well, if we take that off, we're going to have a huge hole over here. I agree. So they left it stubbed off. There was nothing else to cut it off to. This is a type of tree that does sucker out. And, you know, the only other option would be to remove it, but then there's no framework on this side of the tree. They did leave, you know, a few little bits of life over there. It's a tough situation any way you look at it. You can see here's where a limb broke off. That one might have been hit by a truck. You know, we cleaned off the stub as best we can, but you know, when something tears, you just got to leave that. And you can see the evidence of all the old wounds in all of these trees. So decisions on how to prune a tree are based on a number of factors. One is the amount of traffic that is under the tree, the location of the tree. In this case, these trees don't have a great area to root into. And unfortunately, you've got a lot of trucks that come through here, so all the low branches have to come up. To be honest, this species was a terrible choice for a median because it's known to have a wide-growing, wide-spreading, low-hanging growth pattern that, you know, it just doesn't work when you have vehicles that come through. And all the moving trucks that come through this complex scrape and break everything, not to mention the garbage trucks. So this tree now is reasonably safe. We've taken off a lot of weight all the way around, but still retained the integrity of a framework. We've got a trunk canker disease going on here, and I'm not exactly certain what type of canker it is. It's causing a lot of problems, and it's going all the way up into the tree in many areas. I don't think we should take the tree out, but I think its lifespan is going to be shortened because of this problem. Now I found some armillaria mushrooms right here. That's what they look like. Sometimes they become great big clusters. Sometimes they'll grow as much as 12 inches or more out of the ground. That is a wood decomposing mushroom that attacks healthy tissue. That could lead to something much worse, so that is something I'm going to mention to them to pay attention to. Now, it's not an excessively large tree, and we do have to do some more weight reduction on this one. I hate to say take a tree out until it really shows signs of decline. But you got to pay attention to all the little things that you find. It's also important to pay attention to all the old wounds. That wound right there was done probably 7 or 8 years ago. And there's one that is completely closed up. Now, a lot of people will say that that is healed. No, really all it's done is covered up the weakness. Now, the weakness always stays inside. Once it gets covered up, then the decay can and generally does slow down considerably, but it's always something that you have to pay attention to. Chainsaws are really aggressive tools, and most people make a much larger cut than you should take. My rule of thumb, and that's what's recognized in the industry, is to preserve the branch bark collar and take the smallest cut that you can without leaving a stub. So this actually, if it was left out to about here, would have closed over even more so because it wouldn't have been such a large wound. And when you compromise the integrity of the branch bark collar, a lot of times what happens is the tree's built-in protective barriers become compromised, and instead of this walling off this decay in a little triangle inside, the decay will end up spreading up and down through the system of the tree, leading to future hollowing and future much more extensive decay. Now, if you look way up there, you really have to pay attention when you're evaluating these trees, but when you look way, way up there, right about here, you can see where a big limb that was going out that way has torn off and ripped. So that is very likely much more of a weakness than it appears from the ground. Consequently, we're going to have to take a lot more weight off on that side and take a closer look and see how bad that is.